Hello, my name is Faina, and I have dedicated the last 7 years to honing my craft and fine tuning my strategy.
Welcome to Trading in the Zen, where we help traders find their groove. I'm your co-host, Louise Nonwheeler, a trading psychologist and multi-award-winning clinical hypnotherapist. Join us weekly as we delve into the trading world, exploring psychology, well-being, health, and mindset. Through expert insight, interviews, and actionable strategies, we help you as traders unlock the mindset needed to navigate markets with confidence and achieve peak performance.
At Trading in the Zen, we believe that there's much more to trading than numbers and probabilities. Like an athlete, a trader should operate in their peak state. Each week, you will have mind-blowing interviews as well as actionable tips and strategies that you can implement in your daily life to become a better trader. Thanks for spending time with us today. Now, let's dive right in. In this episode, we interview Bob Martin. Bob's remarkable journey spans from being a high-powered criminal trial attorney to a mindfulness coordinator, certified meditation mentor, and a published author. At 74, Bob draws from his extensive experiences as a criminal lawyer, restaurant owner, corporate consultant, and community leader to help others discover clarity, resilience, and peace. Welcome to Trading in the Zen. Today we have someone very special. Bob, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me, and thanks for the platform.
Welcome on the show, Bob.
Sorry. Yeah, and we're very, very excited to talk to you because as we were discussing before we started recording, as traders, for us, timing is everything. A timing could be a difference between a winning trade or a losing trade. Timing means, that second before you tilt and you potentially blow up an account. Timing is everything. And we know that you have a very interesting take on the subject of timing. So tell us a little bit about yourself and let's get into the whole timing situation.
So I have a very colorful, history. I've been around for 75 years, and it could take a long time to go through it. But just to let you know, I was a very successful lawyer during a very tumultuous time in Miami, the cocaine cowboy days. And I'd say I was a first or second tier lawyer. I was making money hands over foot. Unfortunately, I was spending it about as quickly as I was making it. And so things personally were falling apart, and I was seeing a therapist. By happenstance, by absolute luck, I found out that my therapist was one of the top tier students of a 72nd generation Taoist master from the Shaolin Temple. And in Taoism, which is one of the sisters, I suppose, of Buddhism, everything is timing. It's all about timing. As Master Ni once explained it to me, he says, Bob, if you really want the apple that's on the tree, you can let your desire take over and let your emotions take over and grab for the apple when it's not ripe yet. And you're going to twist and you're going to pull and you're going to jerk and you're going to get the apple, but it's not even going to be sweet. And if you wait too long, it's going to drop and rot. But if you get it just right, it comes off easy and it's sweet. He said, if you want to understand what having mastery in life is, it's interfering the least and having the greatest impact. And that all depends on when you do what you need to do. Sometimes you need to back off. Sometimes you need to go forward. Sometimes you need to decide. Sometimes you need to contemplate. But knowing when to do which is what wisdom's all about.
I love that. I love that. One of the best interviews I've seen is with Bruce Lee. And he said to the guy, be like water. And I try and live by that as well as much as possible. But it's difficult because we're human. We're emotional beings. Life's busy. Life is probably too busy for us on this planet currently. And so it can be difficult to navigate and be like the flow of water. But what suggestions would you sort of recommend to people?
If you'll allow me to, I just want to tell you a story that I think illustrates it the most. Okay. So when I was in Miami, we had 14 felony courts going all day, every day. And on Monday was when the calendar for the week was called. So all of the defendants that were going to be appearing in each of those 14 courts were at the courtroom, and the courtrooms were all packed, hardly able for the air conditioning to keep up with the body heat. It was papers strewn around like it was a battlefield, except for one, and he was my mentor, Judge Gerald Kogan. And you would go down to Judge Jerry Kogan's courtroom, and everybody had a seat, and it was cool, and it was calm, and he was not perturbed. And I went in to see him in chambers one day, and I said, Judge Kogan, do you ever walk around here on a Monday and see what's going on in the other courtrooms? And he goes, yes, Bob, yes, I do. And I said, and do you have fewer cases than everybody else? And he goes, no, I don't. And he said, well, how do you account for it? He says, well, sometimes a case needs to be continued and sometimes it needs to be tried. I think what happens is the other judges get emotionally involved. Mm-hmm. Somebody asks for a continuance and they don't like the way they asked and they just don't want to give it to them. Or they want to push something just because they want to push it. And they don't separate out what needs to be done. What is the actual situation going on? You need to be sensitive to, is it right? Is it ready to go? And if it's ready to go, you need to be ready to do it. But if it's not ready to go, you got to be ready to let it pass. And you can't get emotionally involved in it. And I think that that's the difference. Maybe I've been around for a little bit longer and I'm a little bit more mature and I don't get so deeply involved. I don't know what it is, but I seem to have a better sense of timing.
How do you strengthen that patience or the emotional capacity to detach, right? Because we're so outcome oriented and we have timelines, and when something is so close it's almost within your fingertips, and in that moment, I suppose, when you really let go, how do you strengthen that muscle that allows you to have that kind of insight, and override your system to get things?
Yeah, that is a terrific question. And there is an answer to that question. And the answer is meditation. Mm-hmm. Now, a lot of people think that meditation, when they say meditation, what they really mean is relaxation. What they mean is quieting the mind and relaxing and taking things easy and being at peace. But that's not what meditation is. Meditation really, many times, is not even comfortable. What meditation is, and I'm going to answer your question, it is asking the question that when I say, Louise, I had a thought, I am saying to you that I am not the thought, it's something that I had. And then I have to ask, well, if I had a thought, who is the I that had the thought? And when we are doing what we're doing and we're having our thoughts, we are in the thoughts just like a fish in the aquarium doesn't know that it's in water. It is our atmosphere. We're in it. We're living it. We're having our thoughts. We are our thoughts. The skill of meditation, and you pick this up within 1 week or 2 weeks of 10 minutes a day, is to separate from your thoughts and learn how to watch your thoughts. The moment, I teach 15 college kids, every semester, and I've got corporate CEOs in my private practice. And within 2 weeks, when they separate from their thoughts, all of a sudden, it's like, oh, now I see what you're saying. Because when you develop the skill of observing your thoughts, not stopping them, not quieting them, but allowing them to come and go, then the impulse to do something out of emotion is also something that just comes and goes. The anger that you feel at the moment for missing a good deal, just comes and goes. And so you develop the skill of allowing, the passage of your feelings and emotions to just come and go, and you don't have to attach to them. And therefore, you can decide if you want to act on them or not. And that gives you that ability to have the introspection and the contemplation that you were asking about.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, my happiest, or not my happiest, my most peaceful times have been when I've meditated, whether it's been in a group or by myself. And I have learned to be able to become the observer and have that separation between my higher self or source or whatever people call it, that separation. And they have been, apart from being on a lovely beach, my most blissful moments in life. But it's interesting because that first thought that comes in, it comes in and it's an impulse. So we can't, unless we consciously choose out that first thought, it's that first thought. And that's the time where we can go, right, now I can choose my next thought.
Yes, ma'am.
But what if
to teach this
I'm
to
sorry,
my
go
son.
on, go on.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go on.
So I played a game with my son when he was in his teen years, and it was yeah, but. And the way that you play it is when somebody expressed that first thought that comes up that you were just talking about, the other person goes, yeah, but, and then offers a different version of a first thought. And the person goes, yeah, but, and then the game is to see how many different versions of a first thought we might have had and how things would have gone differently. So we went to an Applebee's for lunch once, and the waitress comes over and she's all, nice. I'm going to take care of you. And, my name's so-and-so, and walks away. And my son has his first thought, which was, oh, she's really bucking for a tip. Right? So game on. So I say, oh, yeah, well, and I'm sorry to say this, but this is what I said. I said, yeah, well, maybe, she got some last night. Excuse me, I'm sorry, but that's just how it went.
Yeah.
And then he says, well, no, maybe she's a college student and her parents just gave her a car. And so we're coming up with all of these possible reasons why she was so friendly. And then I came up with, I said, no, I'll tell you what it is. She just thinks I'm incredibly handsome. And he says, yeah, but, and I go, no, game over. I'm taking that one. I'm going with that one. So the result of all of that was that rather than going with your first impression, she's bucking for a tip, and having a so-so lunch, I flirted a little bit. We had a little, back and forth. I left her a nice tip. We all left. She was happy. We were happy. And everything worked out good for everybody just because we questioned that first thought.
Mm-hmm. Powerful.
Well, but what if, let's say, you have a goal, right? And you're going with the flow to get to the perceived goal. And it's just not coming, and you're being patient and you're going with the flow, but it's just not getting you to where you want to be. Do you continue to observe it? Do you pivot? How do you continue to stay observant when something you really want is on the line? It's much easier to talk about this when things,
Sure.
I'm going to have a sandwich, I'm going to have pizza. Oh, wait, let me observe my thoughts. I'll have a pizza. But what if, like, this is, I really want this and I'm working really hard. It's just not coming. How do you stay observant to that?
Okay, well, there's two things. Maybe the goal is not the right goal. So you have to consider that. I mean, if you're working towards some goal and it's just not happening, maybe it's time to renegotiate the goal to begin with. But what you're asking me is kind of like you walk into a gym and you see, the big bulky guy over there doing a bicep curl with 50 pounds. And you go, well, how do you do that? And my answer would be, you start with a 5-pound weight. So what you're talking about skill, tolerance for discomfort, and, strength. But strength is something that you have to practice and build. You can't just have it. You can't just say, well, this is hard. So So I would say those two things. You have to look at, is the goal the right goal? And if it is the right goal, and I'm just, kind of whining about how long it's taken to get there, then I need to tough it up a little bit. Stop, if it's the right goal and that's where you need to go, then, tough it up and stop whining and, wake up tomorrow and go do it again. Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Sorry, Bob. That brings me on to resilience, because resilience has been quite a strong theme in your life, hasn't it? Like throughout your life. I mean,
Yeah.
what's your personal definition of resilience, and how does a person kind of create it and attain it?
I was given a gift at one time. I won't go into the whole story. I'll just tell you the end result. I was asking, how do you get up and keep going every morning? How do you get up and keep going? And the bottom line was this: you never know when the tipping point comes. You never know when the tipping point comes. And so you get up the next day and you go about the goal that is so hard. You get up and you keep going after it. And you get up and you go and you get up and go, because you never know. Today might be the day when the tipping point comes.
Do you think that some people never get to where they want to go because they quit right before the tipping point?
Yeah. I think there's something cosmic about that. And the other thing is that people that continue to go just after they wanted to quit usually find it. It goes both ways. It's like if you quit, it's usually just before you would have had it, and if you don't quit, you usually get it right after. It's almost cosmic.
Yeah, I think it's an invisible barrier. I think there's a lot to do with the invisible barrier around the fears, the subconscious, the limiting beliefs, which I know you talk about as well.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot to do with that. I mean, would you agree?
I would, because Taoism is symbolized by the yin yang, which is the positive and negative energy, not negative like bad or positive like good, but negative and positive like poles of a battery. So there's no judgment in the negative energy. That doesn't mean bad. It just means the poles of a battery. And Taoism is all about the flow of energy through things. And so, I don't know, what the spiritual makeup of the universe is, but the older I get, the more that I think that there is some kind of binding intelligence, and that when these things happen, like you continue on when you would have quit, and then right after that you find that you achieve. It's almost as if it was set up to teach you to be more, to strengthen, to be stronger. It's almost as if the world was created as a way of making us become more skillful if we pay attention.
Yes.
Do you think it's a matter of faith, right? Because we are, what is faith, right? We want to see the evidence before we believe, but faith kind of teaches us to believe before you see the evidence. And I think in that lies a human struggle that we want to see to believe, and then if we don't see physical manifestation of our belief, then we no longer believe, but that's not faith. So maybe the whole point of this is to have blind faith, because then it's not faith, right? So I think it's just a really funny play on what is faith, because people say, I believe, I have faith. I just need to see a little bit of a light at the end of the tunnel. You're like, well, that's not faith then. It's evidence-based belief. What are your thoughts on the matter?
Well, I'm married to a recovering Southern Baptist who's a Bible literalist, and I'm so faith is a big part. That word is a big part, of her paradigm. And I don't use the word. I use my current working hypothesis. So my current working hypothesis of how the universe works is that there's blah blah and blah blah and blah blah. And if evidence comes to me that says that my theory is doesn't really make sense and that something else makes sense, I think that it's helpful to be flexible enough to be able to move into, a new theory as to what works. I think ultimately, the whole question of purpose and meaning in life, Viktor Frankl, the great psychotherapist that, survived the World War II, said life has no meaning. And because it has no meaning, you can create in it whatever meaning you choose to give it.
Mm.
And so since we really probably will not know how the universe works, I think that to come up with a understanding of the universe that is helpful to you in achieving your goals and gives you strength and support is perfectly fine. And it can be individual to you or it can be part of a group, just as long as it works and ultimately makes you happy.
I love that. I'm a strong believer, like this is my personal belief. I don't believe in coincidences. That's just my belief. I believe in like things like synchronicity, divine timing, things like that. And it's amazing because when we're kind of in a different energy or frequency, what we attract and what comes into our life. And when our frequency, say, for instance, is quite low, we're coming from a space of fear, guilt, shame, quite low frequencies. It's amazing how you find like the car will break down. Like you just have it just compounds. And I think there's a lot in there. I think we're so powerful. I'm not saying that we're powerful enough to break the car down, for it to break down, but it's interesting how it works. I mean, would you agree on that? Do you find?
I again, here's the thing: if having that belief works for you, and it makes you happy and it fills you with the sense of awe when something synchronous happens, and it allows you to feel the awe of a universal connection, then my gosh, why would you want to not think that way? That's just, it's beautiful. If you, I mean, there are other ways that you could look at. I remember one time we were driving in Philadelphia and my friend was talking about something very synchronous and saying, can you believe all of the things that had to occur for that thing to have happened? So and so would have had to do this, and then they would have had to move here, and this would have had to come from there, and all of that. And at the same time, I said, well, you see that igloo water tank on the back of the construction truck in front of us? Can you imagine all of the things that had to occur for that water bucket to be on that truck in front of us? Somebody would have had to make the bucket and made the truck and blah, 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 blah. So you can impute meaning into it. And I think that that's just fine. All of the great wisdom teachers, everyone misunderstand. Not everyone misunderstands. I think that the misunderstanding about all the great wisdom teachers is they came to make you a better person or to make a better world. And I think that they came to make you happy. It's just that by becoming a better person, you get happy. And by making a better world, you get happy. And by feeling that there is a universal intelligence that supports you, it gives you some sense of relief. So all of these things that they taught, they lead you to being a happy person. It's just kind of, Louise, it's kind of coincidental.
I love that.
All
Thank
of
you so
those
much.
things that make you a better person are the things that make you happy.
Wise words. Wise words.
What about
I'm
sorry, I was just thinking on a subject of happiness. Despite what social media shows us, people feel down. Not not everyone's chipper all the time, and sometimes your emotional bank is just depleted, and you do all the stuff, and you really try, and I'm not talking about depression and all other stuff. I'm just, sometimes you just depleted, and it's really hard to get up in the morning and say, gosh, I got to try again, right? What do you do on days when you feel like nothing is going your way?
Well, the only thing I can do is answer that for myself. If I have to get up and I have to go do something, then I have to push myself through it. If I don't have to get up and I don't have to do anything, then I put it aside and I rest.
Mm.
And
Because I think we don't rest enough. We think rest equals lazy.
We do
And
not
so,
rest enough.
but sometimes more activity will just create more resistance. And if you would just let it die out, and your nervous system calm down and subside, you see things differently. But I think we are taught to work, 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 work. And if you don't get up in the morning, you work, then you're lazy. You're not, you're a loser. And I think people maybe are not being kind enough to themselves, and an extra day of rest would have been the change in perspective they otherwise will not have, because they're on a treadmill, so they don't say anything outside of that, that angst to beat the feeling, as opposed to like sit in it and let it happen.
Well, you just mentioned something which could be the subject of an entire another podcast about being kind to yourself, about loving yourself. I mean, without getting too religious, but again, remember who my wife is. When I hear the two great commandments handed down by the great teacher Jesus, he said, you're going to need to love your God with all your heart, your soul, and your mind. Well, how can you love your God with all your mind if your mind is full of crazy, self criticism? That's one. So you need to love yourself in order to be able to accomplish that commandment. And the other is that he said you need to love your neighbor as yourself. But what if you don't love yourself and you're critical of yourself? Was he saying you should be critical of your neighbor? Because that would be loving your neighbor as yourself. And so the commandments from him and from Lao Tzu and from all the other wisdom teachers said we need to be kind to ourselves. We need to have self-compassion. And then you get these advertising guys who come up with this masculine icon of the Marlboro man, the big guy sitting up on his horse in charge of the whole, herd, and that's what it means to be a man. Come on, give me a break.
Yeah, and that brings me on to the next question is, how do you, because obviously you teach, how do you integrate brain science, psychology, and spiritual teachings?
They're very intimately connected, because being the Westerners that we are, we, just like you said, Faina, that we want to have some physical manifestation. Tell me why it's happening, So, for example, we talk about resting. Well, we know that we spent 1.7 million years as hunter-gatherers, and that's what our bodies and minds evolved for. We're only a couple of thousand years in our modern kind of environment. So what we are designed for is we're designed for a lot of very hard physical work during the day and sitting around the fire at night and telling stories. That's what we're designed for. So our brain has two sides to it. It's got the stress, fight, flight side, the sympathetic nervous system, and the parasympathetic, the rest and digest. When our brains, we know that when there's more electrical activity on the right side of our prefrontal cortex, we know that you will feel 87% of the people who have more activity on the right side of their brain self-reflect as being critical, negative, the glass being half full, pessimistic. 86% of the people that have more activity on the left side of their brain report being optimistic, hopeful, connected, spiritual. So we know that the brain science tells us that we have these two sides of the brain that both have different functions. One of them is for survival and to be aware of danger and to be protective. The other is to be creative and connected and come together, because we have to exist as tribes. We have to exist as communities. We are a community-based animal. You know, we go in herds. And so in order to have that herds, you have to have a part of your brain that says, I want to connect. When you relax and you start, you know, activating the left side of your brain, you see the world more broadly. When the right side is there, you sense danger, you focus and narrow, because I want to find the solution to the problem. But when you relax, you see the world more broadly. And here's the crazy thing: your peripheral vision literally increases. You literally see the world more broadly. So, you know, we need to have these two sides, and they need to be in balance. And so my answer to you, Faina, is what do? You have to curate your environment. You have to put beautiful things around you. You have to allow yourself to feel awe. Allow yourself to be compassionate. Go out and watch a beautiful sunrise, and then remember it the next day. If there was a time in your life when you have a photograph of a time in your life that you got a beautiful sensation, make sure that that's around you someplace and it reminds you of that. You know, curate your environment, build up that electrical activity on the left side of your brain. And that's how you integrate the physical science, because just by telling you about what we know about the electrical activity, you can see how important it is to bring beauty into your life, and the motivation to do it is there.
That's
You know,
wonderful.
you were just making me think of where we spend so much of our time retelling the bad stuff, right? We somehow, like if something bad is happening, we ad nauseum will retell that story to everyone that will listen and then replay it in our own minds. When
Right.
something good happens, we kind of go, oh, that was good. You
Yeah,
know,
right.
and the brain does not focus on that, but he would instead go, yeah, but that one time though, you know, and we're in this constant negative feedback loop, and it is so hard to break, because I think it's how we're raised, and I think it's a muscle that's the strongest, and it's you know, unless you exercise, you have to reteach yourself basically how to be. And it is so hard to do when life is still happening around you. You know, we don't get to go to, you know, India and sit in monastery and
Right.
restart our lives. You know, it's much easier to do that when there are no triggers in your environment. But the minute you get back into your normal, you know, environment, which is to your point, create a different environment, right? The minute you're there, everything is a trigger object. And so
Yes.
it's just so hard.
So let's do a little experiment. I'm going to give you a little piece of brain science, and you're going to tell me whether that changes your paradigm about thinking about this, okay?
Hmm.
All right. So you know, in a light bulb, there's a very, very thin filament, right? Very, very thin thing. And because it's so thin, when the electricity passes through it, there's a lot of resistance, because the electricity, you know, can't get through that thin thing. So it heats up and right? If there was a thicker wire there, it would be cool because there would be no resistance, right?
Right.
Okay. When neurons in the brain, when you have a thought, when they fire together, they begin to wire together and they form neural pathways. So these, you know, 15 neurons, they wired together when you had this particular thought. The next time you have the thought, another 15. The next time you have the thought. So you have very, very thin neural pathways. And what that feels like to you is, oh, I don't like to do crossword puzzles, or I don't like math, or I don't like to think about that, or it's hard for me to think about that, or I don't think about that. If you have a very thick neural pathway, well, then you say, oh, I'm good at crossword puzzles, or I like to do that, or let's do a puzzle, or let's do some math, or that's how it feels. It's easy, and it's actually hard to think when your neural pathways are thin. Now, every time you repeat a bad story, you're building a thicker neural pathway for that story. And it's going to become easier and easier, and it's going to suck the electricity because it's easier for it to go down that path. It actually physically is changing your brain. Now, knowing that repeating a negative story over and over is actually physically changing your brain to make you more likely to tell negative stories, does that change your motivation to want to retell a story? Because you start to retell it, now you're going to think, oh, what am I doing to my brain? Right?
Yeah.
So
I'm going to start saying I'm not giving this airtime. This is getting no more of my airtime. No more of the airtime.
You know, my wife, my daughter, her daughter calls her often, and she's always telling her all of the stories about work and everything else. And I keep saying to her, I said, you're just not helping her, because all you're doing is creating this habitual way of communicating that's about bad stuff that happened. And you know, it does. The taxi drivers in London, they have to learn the map of London.
My stepdad.
Am I right?
Yeah, my stepdad is a black taxi. He used to be a black taxi driver. So they use a different part of their brain.
Well, what they did was they took pictures of the hippocampus of these people before they went into their training. And they measured it after they studied the maps. And they found out that the actual organ had become thicker and taller and thicker.
That's right.
And so they had actually changed the brain with their thoughts, with what they were doing. They changed the structure of the brain so that now they can do things that you and I can't do, because their brain is adapted to that goal. And so going back to trading and timing, you know, the more you do it and the more mistakes that you make, and what winds up happening is that the breadth of your mistake making may be this wide, but over time it becomes more and more narrow. But the crazy part about us humans is that when my mistake were this wide, or if they're this wide, to me, I still get just as pissed off.
Bob, you are an absolute joy. You're just such a joy to talk to, like your energy, like your wisdom. We could talk for hours, and perhaps if Faina is happy as well, maybe you could come back on the show sometime and we can talk about self-compassion and kindness.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I feel calmer just talking to you.
I know.
You know, I feel so zen right now. But trading in Zen, that's funny. But we would love to have you back, and let's talk about compassion and maybe tools of how to treat ourselves better. And because I think as humans we like to commiserate, but we don't like to uplift. Our whole source of socialization is we get together and we bitch about everything, and then everybody cheers and goes home and feels somehow like that they've purged. And very seldom are you in rooms where people are like, let's not talk about that, let's talk about the great things. Right. It's really hard, because I don't think those are the best drinking conversations. So maybe that's what that is. You know, a socialization, you don't go to a bar to talk about how great everything is. But
well, you know what the Buddha said? The Buddha said, you must place guardians. No, you must place guards, like at the portals to your mind.
I love that.
You must place guards at the portals to your mind. Don't look. You know, you see these kids go off these hack and whack, you know, horror films, you know, where, and then you wonder why they have nightmares.
We have to be so careful what we feed our mind. You know, it's really important in this day and age.
It's important to curate your environment. If people, you know, if people are negative and they like to talk negative, maybe you just need to spend a little less time around them.
Change your circle.
Change your circle.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we've come to the end of the show. It's been an absolute pleasure. We do hope you come back because there's so much more to talk about. And I feel like we just scratched the surface. I have a lot more questions. As you can see, I like to ask questions, but it's been such a pleasure. And thank you again. And thank you for watching and listening. We'll see you next time.
Thank you. Thanks, Bob. See you next time. Thank you.